Welcome to the MS-Perspektive podcast, Perspective with a K as I'm German. I'm Nele von Horsten, MS patient, patient advocate and author. I'm bringing you interviews, inspiration and information about living with multiple sclerosis and show you ways how you can positively influence the disease and make the best out of your diagnosis. On ms-perspektive.com you will find the show notes, 11 free tips as a PDF and lots of other information. And now the show begins. Thanks for tuning in again, and welcome to episode number 144, Accessible Adventures, How Kristen Turned a Wheelchair Journey into Empowerment. And now enjoy the interview. Hello, Kristen. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show and to see you online again.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, and before we actually start with the interview, it would be lovely if you could introduce yourself to the audience so they know who is with me on the podcast today. I met you during our EUPATI training in Madrid, but the listeners have no clue about you yet.
Of course. So my name is Kristen Paskins, and I am originally a registered children's nurse. So my background is in nursing. I now work in clinical research as a clinical research associate. So I oversee the monitoring of clinical trials in the UK. And on the side, I'm also a wheelchair paddle player. So I am currently the GB Num wheelchair paddle player in the UK. So travel a lot for tournaments through that.
Fantastic. Thank you for that introduction. So, as I mentioned, you and we recently finished the EUPATI program. What was it about and what inspired you to take part?
So the EUPATI program is something that was recommended to me by a colleague, actually. I wasn't aware of it initially, and she's someone who's worked in patient advocacy, patient engagement for a very long time within clinical research, and she knew that this is something that I'm really passionate about and wanted to learn more about. And although I do have a background in clinical research and working in healthcare for 10 years, I didn't really feel like I had the in-depth knowledge that I think the EUPATI course really offers. And it goes through the whole life cycle of clinical trials, looking at all the way from, how drugs are created, the clinical trials process, how that all works, all the regulatory bodies that are involved, and also all the way through to health technology assessments and how those approved drugs go onto the market as well. So it's really interesting just to get that really in-depth understanding of that process. But it's also very much focused on the patient involvement as well during that process. So at every stage, how can we involve patient lived experiences, patient insights to make each of those steps much more patient focused and ensure that we are meeting patients' needs at every point. And that's something that I would really love to be more and more a part of with my career, hopefully continue in clinical research.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and it's really a great thing. And I could already make another MS patient aware of the program, and she started in the next cohort. So I'm very happy about that, the German one, because we need more German EUPATI fellows. Okay, so you mentioned in our WhatsApp group that as part of the EUPATI program, you traveled alone to Madrid for the first time with your wheelchair. What did that journey mean to you personally?
Yeah, so me, it was a huge milestone, actually. And for those that don't know me, I only lost my mobility in the year 2022, so not many years ago. And for me, that happened. I was given a diagnosis of functional neurological disorder, which is a brain network disorder. So if you can imagine your brain like a computer, all the parts are there, but for some reason they're not functioning. The signals aren't being sent correctly, and therefore we can have so many different symptoms as a result of that. And for me, one of those was losing the ability to walk across about the space of a week, so very, very quickly. And that real sudden life change, a lot of things happen. You lose your independence, you lose a lot of confidence, you don't have wheelchair skills to begin with. That takes, years to learn and develop. And just having the confidence to go out in society and be confronted with questions about your mobility loss and the change in identity, your relationships with people, everything in your life is impacted by that. And I'm sure many listeners can relate to that experience. It's not something you ever expect to happen in your life, but when it does, you're not ready with the tools at that point. So it really is a journey of navigating that new experience and trying to find out who are you as a person in this new situation. And for me, for a good year and a half, I pretty much never really left my house for many of those reasons. And there definitely was a social anxiety that came with that. You know, the fear of going out, seeing someone that hadn't seen me as a wheelchair user now, them wanting to ask questions. I wasn't ready to answer them. And so that meant that I had lots of barriers around me that really prevented me from being an independent person like I used to be. And something that really changed that for me was wheelchair sport, and we can talk about that in a moment. But as part of that process, you have to think about, okay, now accessibility is a huge issue. You know, that's accessibility not just in going into shops, and that's accessibility in how you get around. You need an adaptive vehicle. I had to get a new car and have hand controls, so that was a whole different journey. But also with travel, there's that extra level of anxiety because you rely a lot on other people, whether that's through language, whether that's through, having to get from one place to another by taxi, and you don't know this other person, they're a stranger to you, and there obviously is some anxiety that comes along with they don't know about my wheelchair, how will they handle it, and with air transport particularly, because you have to put so much trust in other people literally handling you to get in and out of your seat and through the aircraft. So there's so many steps to even just having the confidence to make that decision. I want to travel for the first time. And then the next step of, okay, I'm going to do it independently. So I have no one with me, not a family member that can really advocate for me in that moment. And it took me a long time to get to the point where I felt like this is going to be the trip to do it. And I think the confidence really came from partly because I knew when I got there would be so many amazing patient advocates I knew would help if there was any issue. So that gave me a lot of reassurance. As well, I do speak Spanish, and that's something I've studied for a very long time. So that definitely helped with the communication side quite a lot, because the communication is so important when you are navigating life with a disability. And I think as well, since I've traveled quite a bit through sport and through my tournaments, I understand the whole accessibility side of traveling internationally now a lot better. So I think with all these little steps, this just felt like the perfect moment to take that leap and just see how it went.
Yeah, great. And speaking the language you are traveling to in the country, that makes totally sense. It's easy. And I was always looking because for me, my whole family joined, and my little one was sitting in um, a buggy, and my parents were, or my husband were taking care of her, and they had to think about how accessible are the certain stations. So of course, for them, it's easier to overcome to maybe just carry the little one and the buggy, the stairs up and down, but still it's not fun. So I found Madrid not too accessible when it came to public transport, to say that. But yeah, how did you plan for this trip practically and emotionally?
So, I mean, emotionally to begin with, a lot of a lot of research and speaking with friends. I have one very close friend actually who's from Madrid, so she was able to help me a lot in terms of public transport, what would be accessible, which stations I'm able to use. I think we've realised that actually the buses were a better option because all the buses in Madrid have ramps, so the ability for wheelchair users to get on board. So I looked at that primarily as the bus routes and did my research and working out how could I get from my hotel to the venue. Um, and as well, in terms of the emotional side, I think you just have to go to a point where you accept that there will be a level of inaccessibility, and it's just preparing yourself that things will go wrong, but you can't prevent that from stopping you from having these opportunities. So there has to be a level of preparation, I think, to have those challenges. And that's not easy, I think many people who have disability will really relate to the experience of the frustration of going somewhere and finding it's not accessible. And when that happens over and over again, as we know, and this is not just an issue in my country in the UK, but across the world, there are accessibility problems. And there is a lot of resilience that comes with that. So you do become better at communicating. You do become better at working out how to navigate these challenges. I very much used to be someone that would never ever complain about anything. I used to be very, very shy, and ultimately I found that always didn't work in my favor with these challenges. Sometimes you do have to really advocate for yourself, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do more in patient advocacy, because that's how change happens, is by people speaking up and talking about it and confronting a lot of those issues. So I think mentally I had to prepare in that way, that there will be challenges, but to be proud of myself that I was even taking this step, and to recognize the journey that it's taken to get there, and keep that with me. When those challenges happen, I think, sometimes it's expected, but look at how far you've come,
Yes.
that's how I managed it.
Yeah, and you can be so proud on yourself. I mean, you were always there smiling and just enjoying our group of over 100 patient advocates, and brought so much positive attitude into the room. More or less all of our group, all people were doing that, but still, it was really such a lovely atmosphere. So what would you say? What were your biggest concerns before the trip, especially regarding accessibility?
So I've traveled abroad quite a lot, actually, as a wheelchair user now, and I would say that the travel through the airports, flying is I think the biggest challenge, for a number of reasons. Often you're relying so much on a team called mobility assistants. So before you even travel, you have to book that you're a wheelchair user, you're going to be bringing a wheelchair, you send them your measurements, and then when you arrive, you have to check in with this particular team. And their responsibility is to either take you to the gate of the aircraft and help you on board, or they will meet you at the gate. And if you're a wheelchair user, you have to use something called an aisle chair, which is essentially a very, very skinny wheelchair, which fits on the aircraft. So your wheelchair will then be taken and put underneath. And therefore, you have to put a lot of trust in these people, because they are physically handling you. And these aisle chairs are not something you can push yourself. So there is that level of independence that's then taken away from you, that I think often people don't realize what that means and what that represents for someone who has, eventually got to this point of being independent and then not being able to do this on their own. But issues I've had in the past is mobility assistants you've booked in. However, when you arrive, there's an issue. They don't have the staff available. You spend a lot of time waiting. I remember with this trip particularly, actually, I arrived really, really early to the gate, because normally they want to put the wheelchairs on first.
Mhm.
And on this particular occasion, the mobility assistants weren't there. So they started boarding the aircraft, and I was still waiting. The whole aircraft was boarded. I was still waiting. And I'm not allowed onto the aircraft until someone is there to actually assist me.
Mhm.
And it can't even be a family member. It has to be a member of this team, because they have specific training, and they won't allow anyone else to help you on board. So you really are, in the hands of these people, and you have to put so much trust in the system. And on this occasion, and it isn't the only time this has happened, nobody came. So the crew that were at the gate then had to phone up to mobility assistants, say, what's happening? We have this passenger who's a wheelchair user. She needs to get on board. The whole aircraft is ready to go, other than this one individual. Where is, the staff to come and support her? And I was very fortunate in that they arrived just as we had to leave. We couldn't have waited any longer. But then you end up going onto the aircraft, and then you're then wheeled in your aisle chair past the whole flight of passengers, who are all thinking, why are we so delayed? Oh, it
Mhm.
must be because of this person. So immediately you get this sense of just feeling uncomfortable, that you are somehow responsible for this flight being delayed, although it's not your fault at all. But this happens, and it happens more often than it should happen. And it's not just getting on board the plane. Often there's issues as well coming off. So they have the same process, the same people that have to arrive, and you're waiting. And I've been on a flight for over an hour and a half with the cleaners on board,
Oh, poor you.
waiting for staff to come and collect me off the flight, and I can't get off without them. So you have this part, which is, causes a lot of anxiety, but then you also have the next part, which is, okay, now I need my wheelchair, but where is it? My own one. I've heard horror stories of people having their chairs broken. For me, they've often taken my wheelchair to the luggage carousel rather than to the door of the plane, which means I can't go anywhere. And sometimes the cabin crew will say, oh, well, we really need you to get off because this flight needs to go. So then they'll say, okay, someone will take you in another one of these sort of chairs that you can't push yourself to the other side of the airport where they have the luggage, only to find, I've had this before, where the chair isn't then there. And then you get left waiting for half an hour for someone to go off and find it. And you're thinking, without this chair, I have no ability to go anywhere by myself. And when you're in a foreign country, it's quite scary. And I think the world generally it doesn't put enough priority, I think, or understanding on how that feels as an individual to be in that situation, and what that mobility aid means for you and your independence and your ability to do what you want when you've traveled somewhere for a reason, whether that's for a holiday, whether that's for, exploring a city. And without that mobility aid, you're not even able to meet any of your activities that you're wanting to do, So it does cause a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. But I think of all the parts of a traveling experience, the flight is always the hardest part. Once you're there, then you've got to deal with taxis, etc. But they're a bit more manageable, and there's more people around, I think, to support you. Whereas when it's a flight, the flight goes with or without you.
Do you have
An impact other things. So
yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that so much in detail. Do you have any idea of what people could do to speak up and to maybe at least change the situation in the future? Because when more people are speaking up, normally that is the case in advocacy. At one point, airlines hear that voice and maybe change something, because in the future there will be more and more people who need to use a wheelchair because people are getting older and everything. And Mark Webb from the UK always says, 80% of all people get their disability during life. They are not born that way. So it's quite an important group of customers.
It's so true. Yes. I mean, I would say that if you ever have any of these experiences, definitely report it to the airline, send in a form describing your experience, because they do log it, and those statistics are then used when it comes to making decisions about the way that they run their organizations. In the UK, actually, we have an amazing advocate called Sophie Morgan, and she started a campaign called Rights on Flights. It's a global campaign, so anyone in any country can actually report their experiences also to the Rights on Flights website. And she actually goes to a lot of these airlines, goes to their meetings and sort of talks to them about disability rights and how things need to be changed. She's even working on future designs of aircrafts being wheelchair accessible, which means you shouldn't have to have your wheelchair taken away from you. You should be able to board the flight with your chair, because it is a part of you, and your independence. So there are great hopes that in the future this will be a possibility for new aircrafts that are being built. But she does a lot of amazing work advocating for disabled people when it comes to flying. And I know I have met her once, actually. She did a TED talk in London at the beginning of this year, and I went along to listen. She was so interesting, and you can really hear how passionate she is about this particular issue, because not just from her own experiences, but for people that she knows who have similar problems. And there is a documentary we have a channel called Channel 4. They have a website where you can watch this documentary called The Right to Fly campaign. And it talks about these individuals' experiences, but it was also a study. They sent out different people with different mobility challenges on different airlines, and they actually collected the data to work out where are the challenges. And what they found is only 80% of aircraft actually have aisle chairs on board. So if you are on a plane and you need to use the toilet, for example, if you're a wheelchair user and you happen to be on a flight that doesn't have an aisle chair, you can't go, which just seems, in this day and age, I mean, you'd think that would be at the bare minimum, but these are things that exist that she's really trying to change. So hopefully in the future we will see that change happening.
And I will put the link. You will give me the link, I'm sure. I will put the link in the show notes and, of course, as well in the blog article, because it sounds very interesting and people should be aware of her agenda, the right to flight, and maybe can contribute to it, because it's really important. This should change it. Wow. Yeah. But yeah, if I think of all the planes I used, I can imagine that most of them did not had really accessible toilets. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Always so small and yeah.
I've only ever been on one flight that had the ability to open out the bathroom. I think it was on a flight to the US earlier this year, actually, and they had two toilet cubicles that were next to each other, but you could remove the wall in the middle, which then made the wheelchair accessible. So you could take the aisle chair inside, but that's the only experience I've ever had of that being the case. Normally, you have to either have someone lift you in, or you have to struggle yourself to kind of hold on to a bar or something to help yourself on the inside. But it's not really feasible, and there are many individuals I know who will actually catheterize themselves just to fly, and that's not something they do on a daily basis, but it's the only way they're able to do, long flight journeys where they're going to need the toilet facilities, which is, absolutely something that should not be happening. But that's the choice at the moment people have to make if they want to travel and be independent like everyone else.
Yeah. Very interesting, and there should be hopefully soon a lot of change. Looking back, is there anything you would plan differently next time?
That's a good question. I think when I look at the experiences that I have, I often reflect on what could I have done differently. What could I have, called ahead or spoken to more members of staff at earlier points just to double check everything is going to happen, the mobility assistants were going to be there, etc. And I think as individuals and people with disabilities, often we can feel like that, like the responsibility has to be on us to do all this extra work. But actually, I think we need to take that pressure off ourselves a little bit. And sometimes, things are going to go wrong anyway, regardless of how much extra time and effort. And you're also living a life. You can't spend all of your free time doing all of this extra work for something that's still outside of your control. So I think in this particular circumstance, although maybe I look back and there's more I could have done, I think it was enough. I think I did everything that I could have done that felt like valuable use of my time. And then from that point onwards, I just have to have faith a little bit in the system, and deal with the consequences if they do happen. There's been other occasions where I felt like especially earlier on in my time traveling, I didn't really have enough experience to know when the issues would arise and maybe could have had a better way of preventing them. And one of those things could be when the flight's about to land and they make the announcement, everyone has to seatbelts back on. I will always say to the cabin crew, please, can you, as soon as we land, speak to the ground staff to make sure they bring the wheelchair up to the flight. And that has made a difference. So there are things like that, which when you've had the experience and maybe something has gone wrong, if it's like a quick thing like that, then it prevents a lot of challenges further down the line. So those are things definitely that I've learnt that have been helpful tools. Pre-booking taxis as well is always helpful, because sometimes, especially with wheelchairs, you can't use certain sizes of vehicles. You need to have something a lot bigger. And if you arrive at an airport, they might not always have a car that's big enough for you. So to pre-book when you can is always helpful. But yeah, a lot of it comes with experience, and every individual will have their own journey and they'll find things that work for them. But I think that, never feel like your disability has to limit you from having these experiences. It's honestly, I think one of the best things I ever did was step out of my comfort zone. It feels really hard. It takes a lot of emotional energy to get to that point. And I remember the first time I remember booking the trip, and, I called up and I booked the wheelchairs and everything. But on the morning of the flight, I was absolutely terrified, thinking this was the worst decision. It's going to be so stressful. Everything's going to go wrong, how we catastrophize in our brains. But now I look back, and this is, just over a year later, how far I've come on that journey and how proud I am and glad that I took that really big step. So I think if you are someone who is thinking about it, and you're thinking, I don't quite have the confidence yet, sometimes the confidence comes with taking that leap. And I can recommend that more than anything.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, you did little steps at the beginning, and then it was your let's say, distance was growing more and more, and you felt more empowered to take flights and whatsoever. What surprised you the most about actually being in Madrid, positively or negatively? But of course, you can also choose another trip. You did a couple of them.
So with Madrid, I think one thing that surprised me, and I'm sure wheelchair users can relate to this, is the hills. So I
Yes.
had planned a bus journey, and I saw that where the bus would stop was something like 10 minutes from the venue. And I could have taken another bus to make it a bit closer, but I thought, oh, it's only 10 minutes. It will be fine. So the first day I took this bus, and then I realized when the bus stopped and I got off the bus that actually there were so many hills between me and the venue. And that's something that is very hard to know until you are somewhere. So I learned from that first day, and I didn't stop there the next time. So yeah, the hills did surprise me a little bit. Um, but fortunately, I mean, I'm someone now who, because I play sport a lot, I do have more muscle strength than I used to. So I was able to navigate it, and it was fine. But I think for most people, and definitely how I used to have been, it just wouldn't have been feasible. So so that was definitely a challenge that I hadn't quite expected. I think as well, with the metro, I thought that there would be more accessible metro stations, but seemingly there weren't. I think there were a few that had work being done to add lifts that weren't there before, but it meant that they were closed, so I couldn't use them. So yeah, I would definitely say the bus network is much better if people are traveling with wheelchairs or need to use lifts. In terms of other trips that I've had, so generally I travel once a month to different tournaments. So, for example, this week on Thursday I'm flying. I've got a tournament in Dubai this weekend, so
Oh, cool.
being there. And I remember the first time I went to Dubai. If anyone's been to Dubai Airport, it's one of the biggest airports in the world. It's just absolutely huge. And one thing they do ask you when you're booking mobility assistance is, can you get yourself from where departures are to the aircraft, or do you need someone to take you and push you the whole way? And me being generally very independent, I said, oh no, it's fine, I'll manage it. And then I got to Dubai Airport and I realized it was miles and miles. So I think next time I might actually accept the assistance there.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was a surprise for me, but it was fine because fortunately I had someone with me that was able to help. But yeah, I would say, looking back, anything that has been a challenge or a difficulty, it becomes a story. It becomes something to talk about. And actually now, especially working with patient advocacy, I realize so much how those stories really help people, whether it's helping them understand, how their experience can be best prepared for, or whether or not people have had similar challenges and they find it really helpful just to talk about those issues so they don't feel so alone. But I think the stories really do. become quite important really when it comes to the work that we do. And that's why I'm so open now about sharing those experiences.
Yeah, which is lovely because there are quite so many people in multiple sclerosis who at one point need the aid of a wheelchair. So it's very lovely. Even so, you have another condition, but speaking up here, I think helps lots of our community, many people. So, what do you say? What were the biggest barriers you encountered, and how did you handle them? Or what was the greatest support tools or information that helped you most to overcome these hurdles?
Yeah, so I mean, barriers definitely accessibility is a huge one. Funny enough, in Madrid, in the hotel I was staying in, the lift broke, and this was the lift to get you from the entrance into the reception. So there was no way into the building when this lift was broken. And I mean, the staff were really, really helpful. In the end, they found a way to take me down into the car park underground in the basement and then find a way up from there. So we had to do some improvising, which was fine. But sometimes you even have an accessibility solution, and even that decides on the day that it's not going to work. Um, so you do have to take things in your stride, definitely. But I would say that the most helpful things, definitely people. I think if you're surrounded by people who really advocate for you and they support you, even when those challenges happen, you can take them in the most positive way because you're with someone and you can not necessarily make a joke about it to make light of the situation, but just to help you navigate that really difficult time, to have someone with you that you really get along with, and can help keep you calm and patient. And that's really important, definitely. Whether that's, a relative that's with you and going on the trip with you. I was very fortunate that the hotel staff where I was staying were just amazing and so helpful in the mornings. They would tell me what the bus timetables were like, and that definitely made traveling a lot easier. Um, so that's definitely useful. Google Maps. I'm the biggest fan of Google Maps because I use it so much, whether that's looking at distances, because there is a wheelchair option on Google Maps,
Ah, okay.
accessibility, and it will give you the accessible routes for things. Um, as well with things like bus timetables. If in the UK, they're very reliably reported in Google Maps, so you can see accurately what time public transport is working, which is very helpful. And yeah, looking at accessible venues on there is really good. So they have the little wheelchair icons, if a restaurant is accessible or not. So that's a tool I use every day. Definitely. Yeah, I think they're the main ones. Definitely good people, a good tool mapping system to help you get around. Um, and it's always worth, as a wheelchair user, knowing where the local decathlon is, or somewhere where you can pump your tires if they go down. For me,
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
planning is if there's an issue, I don't know, if one of the screws comes out of the chair or I pop a tire or something, that there is somewhere nearby that I know I can go to get it fixed if I need it to urgently.
Very, very smart one, yes. And I found the people in Madrid very supportive, very helpful. So they were always asking, "Oh, maybe help with a little kid," but still, I mean, people were aware of the fact that their city is not as accessible as a capital should be.
Yeah, and I think it's with many capitals because they're old, and there's a level of acceptance we come to with accessibility when you do have old buildings. In the UK, it's very similar. In London, it's very challenging sometimes with a lot of old buildings, which is why having good people and helpful, welcoming people really makes a difference.
Yeah. Were there moments you felt especially proud of yourself?
That first day where we came into the room, we had all these tables laid out and everyone could take their seats. And there was something really special about being surrounded by people who have such a passion for others. They care about patients. They share this really, incredible mission. And in no other circumstances would I have met any of these people. I would never have met you. And everyone had such an amazing story and journey, and and just hearing about what brought everybody into this room was really special. And for me, I think to sit there, not only having made this trip on my own for the very first time, which I was really proud to have done, but to think about up until that point, I always felt in my environment that I have all this passion, which sometimes I think goes that bit further than some of the others around me in a working environment. I always thought, like, why is it that I've always felt this underlying mission to really try and make an impact and a difference? And there I am surrounded by people who are just like that. And there was just something so heartwarming about being in that room. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, it was a very energizing atmosphere. I really loved it as well, and even so I couldn't sleep well with, 4 of us in a very small bed. I was able to catch most of the information and especially the energy that was in the air with all of us. It was really great. Did any person or situation during your trip leave a lasting impression?
Wow. Gosh, I think so many actually. I mean, I think something is I've made friends that I would never have expected to make on that trip, and people that I know will be in contact with for a really long time. Um, and that is something that I always value is people that you meet in these environments that are just so unexpected. I would say the some of the ladies I was sat with who work in the same industry as me within clinical research, and especially at the moment, the landscape of working in patient engagement within the pharmaceutical industry is very difficult, with a lot of the changes in the US and the pressure on companies to make very difficult financial decisions. And unfortunately, it means a lot of the time the roles that are more patient focused are the ones that get made redundant, which
Mhm.
you think is the opposite that should be happening, but unfortunately that's how things are at the moment. And then trying to apply for roles like those at a time where a lot of them are being cut is very, very difficult. And I was very lucky to be sat with a few people that work for an organization within patient engagement who were able to give me that confidence that something will come up. Just keep up your perseverance, keep applying, and something will come up. And sometimes we need to hear that, because in our careers it can feel quite isolating, I think, sometimes, because as much as we support other people, at the end of the day you really have to advocate for yourself, and you've got to make the decisions for yourself about what you want to do and where your skills will best be used. And I think, having gone through a process of applying for lots of different things and finding it quite difficult to access the areas that I've really wanted to, I think having people around me that work in those fields that could give me that boost, that yes, your experiences would be so valued here. Don't think that it's because you're not fit for the role. It's just that the timing is quite difficult, but just keep going at it. And that really helped me, definitely.
Yeah, 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 and I totally understand what you mean. I had at the beginning, now it's getting better, but at the beginning I had so often doubts about if that is really a smart choice, being a patient advocate and all these question marks. And luckily, there was always some kind of good message or a person saying, "Yeah, that is important, and please keep on doing it." And that helped to overcome these low points.
Yeah, this
Um,
environment, I think, definitely. I mean, I think there was something so special. I think being in a room full of people who are patient advocates and really value patient advocacy, because I think as the industry as a whole, sometimes it's quite difficult to see the visibility of that and to know that there are so many people that really care and value this work. So yeah, it was really amazing to be part of that.
what did this journey teach you about yourself?
I think this journey taught me not just sort of to be proud of myself for pushing through a lot of the obstacles that I've had to face. I mean, I sometimes I even look back to the end of 2022. I mean, I was very much a different person to how I am now. I lost a lot of confidence. I didn't have any independence. I wasn't even able to push a wheelchair by myself because I lost so much muscle strength. And So my day really was my living room.
Mhm.
My husband was the one who was doing all the caring, the cooking, the cleaning, the on top of his daily work. So his life was massively impacted as well. And I don't think we talk about the impact on carers enough and the support that they get. But for me, I mean, there was definitely a point in my life where I felt like this is how life is always going to be. And I lost all my hobbies. I used to do a lot of, hiking, and I loved doing dance and, a lot of, the things that we love to do that, just feeling free and having so much freedom every single day to just jump down to the shop and pick up the milk that you've run out of. And, and suddenly I was in this situation where, I couldn't drive very easily. I definitely couldn't get a wheelchair in and out of the car by myself. I couldn't push a wheelchair. So having that independence taken away, I felt like, this is how life is always going to be. And I really wish at that point that there was someone in my life who had that lived experience that could say to me, how you feel now is not how it's always going to be. Because I think for many of us that have acquired disability, and I'm sure for people with MS it's a very similar experience. You do lots of research, you watch YouTube videos, people talking about their lived experience and losing their mobility, and I remember one video especially, funnily enough, they thought I had multiple sclerosis. That was the first diagnosis they were going to give me, until later on they thought, actually, we think it's more of a functional neurological disorder. But I was watching a lot of YouTube videos, and there was this girl who she was diagnosed with MS very, very young. And she said she went to one of her first appointments with her consultant, and she was sat in the waiting room, and everyone around her had a mobility aid. And she said, I was just so scared and so terrified that that's what my life's going to look like. And I watched that video thinking, oh gosh, that is just must be the worst thing to happen. And then suddenly here I was as a wheelchair user, within the space of the week. And I thought back to that video going, my life is, you feel like your life's over, and
Mhm.
it's so dramatic. That is how it feels in the moment. And I really wish that I had someone like where I am now to go, do you know what? It's not always going to be this way. There are ways that you can rebuild your independence. Your identity might not feel like it's very strong at the moment, but you will get there and you will find your new sense of self, and you will rebuild the connections with people, and you won't feel so scared about going outside anymore, and you'll build your wheelchair skills, and you'll, go into a sporting community or work in patient advocacy where you'll meet so many amazing people who are like-minded just like you. And those are the people that will make you feel like you would never change a thing. And that's how I feel now. And that is a message which I will always, always share, because I know how much it would have meant to me at the time. And I really hope it helps other people as well.
Yes, so important. Yeah, thank you for sharing it with the audience here. So, what message would you give to others with mobility challenges who dream of traveling but are afraid of taking the first step?
I'd firstly say the fear is very normal. It's such a normal thing. I can't tell you enough how, you know, any kind of travel anyway, there's always logistical challenges. Even as an able-bodied person, as I was before, you still might have, your taxi driver doesn't turn up on time, the flight's delayed, or, rain means that they're not able to take off at the time that they wanted to. So many different things could potentially happen. And definitely accessibility does add additional challenges. But there are definitely ways that you can prevent those as much as possible. I would definitely say travel with someone that you trust, someone that if there is a difficulty, they're going to help keep you calm. They're not going to inflate the situation even more by getting frustrated, or because I know it is a frustrating situation. But I think the company that you have is really important to help keep you calm in those moments. So yeah, definitely preparation is really important, but also you have as much right to travel and have that freedom and have those experiences as much as anyone else. And don't feel like because you have a disability that you're not also entitled to do that. So I think if you just take the time to think about what are the things that you'd really love to do in your life. And if travel is one of them, never let that fear stop you. Sometimes we've got to experience things with that little bit of fear. And once you get to the other side, that's when you're like, right, I've done it. And I've done it this one time. I can do it again. These might have been the challenges, but we can work out ways to prevent those in the future. And with time, it does become easier. I've traveled quite a lot now over the last year, and I very easily could have never ever done that first trip because of that fear. And I'm so glad that I did it. And I really, really hope that I can encourage people to take that leap as well.
Yeah, great. What's next for you in life, work, or travel, Kristen?
I have many plans. So I'm one of those people where, like, if I see challenges or issues, and if it's something that I can influence in some kind of positive way, I always want to do my best. And I think, especially now, having this experience, I was already working within clinical research, but also as my experience being a nurse and having a lived experience now, I realized how much value I can bring to so many spaces where patients often don't get to access, these conversations, whether that's influencing policy, whether that's advocating for people's lived experience to get, even drugs approved, for example. And definitely, I see my future is definitely working in patient advocacy within those spaces. But also because I have a bit of crossover with sport, and I know how much the sporting community and being part of that and everything it's done for my confidence, it's changed so much for me. Really, that was the catalyst for me feeling like I was living life again. And my experience was, I would never have got into that if I didn't have that one-off chance meeting with someone that really encouraged me to give it a go. I never ever would have thought that sport was something for me, and ultimately that's what changed my life. So starting in January, I will be launching a campaign, and that's to make the information of disability sport organisations available within hospitals and clinics around the UK, so that anyone that has, whether it's an acquired disability or a healthcare experience, and they're going through this journey of having all these tests done, and they might not have a diagnosis yet, or they get the diagnosis, as often we have in functional neurological disorder, but then there's no real treatment options. So people are just left to manage things themselves. And I never think that that's enough for people. So what I would love is that the information around these communities that could really, really help those people to actually be provided as part of their healthcare plan. So that's a campaign that I will be starting, and I'm really excited for it because I know, even if it changes one person's, environment from feeling like they're very isolated and they don't have that support, and because the community and the connection with individuals doesn't come from the hospitals often, it comes from the patient organizations and it comes from the disability organizations. So we need to find ways that people can access that more easily, and that's why I've got this little mission, and hopefully in the future we will start to see some change there.
Fantastic. That's really a great mission. And dear listener, if you are living in another country than the UK, maybe you can think about doing the same thing. Just trying to spread the word and inspire other people, because that's really a great mission. I love that. I love that idea and love to see that fly. What change would you like to see in accessibility or inclusion in the next 5 years?
I would love to see, I think building regulations definitely don't go far enough. Challenges that I find are, sometimes you might have a door that's wide enough for a wheelchair, but it's still very heavy and you can't open it. So you still need someone else to open it for you. Or you might have a ramp, but they're too steep. So there are lots of accessibility things that I think could be a lot better. Working in sport as well, I noticed that whereas clubs might have accessibility in terms of step-free access to get into the building, actually there's not access to the court, or there's not, disabled changing facilities. And that's something I'm really working with building developers to change some of those expectations. Because as people with disabilities, it doesn't mean that you spend your life at home and you're not wanting to work and you're not wanting to go out and do all these things. Like, we are still living members of society. We want to contribute to those areas. We want to participate in sport. We want to be able to access all the same places as everybody else. And I think sometimes, the societal assumptions around individuals with disability is often completely different to the reality of it. And I think that's something that I would love to change, is some of those attitudes, and accessibility just being seen as a priority for everything. It shouldn't be that a building is made and then afterwards, when they notice people start having issues, that they then go, oh, okay, maybe we can look at changing it. It should be there from the very, very beginning. Any new building, it should be a requirement. And yeah, I mean, even hospitals. There's a hospital I often go to, the the blue badge parking. So blue badge parking is essentially wheelchair parking in the UK. It's up a hill. So you get out of your car, but then you have to go down the hill to get to the entrance to the hospital, which is very dangerous if you're an independent wheelchair user. And sometimes what I notice is places that are accessible, they're accessible if you have someone there to support you, to hold the door, to push you up the ramp, to help you down the really steep slope, but they're not accessible for independent people. And I think the world should be looking at people with disability as if they're independent and they want to do all these things on their own. So that's something I'd really hope to improve in the future.
Yeah, I agree 100%. If you could tell city planners one thing about making places more accessible, what would it be? I mean, of course, there are many things, but maybe the one thing that would make the biggest difference at the beginning.
I would say city planners. It's always difficult to come up with one. I think if you are doing any changes to a building, and let's say it's any facility that's new, absolutely should always have a lift. That's the bare minimum. I was at a shop actually at the weekend, and really beautiful sort of farm shop, and they have a lot of the Christmas decorations out at this time, and they have an upstairs level to their shop, but there was no lift. And this shop, every few months they're always doing building work. I think they've got like a spa at the back, and they've got like a gardening area, and they're adding all these things, but they still have no lift. And you're thinking, like, accessibility should be the priority before doing any of these other things. If you have the finances to do it, a lift compared to the cost of building an entire spa is nothing. So absolutely, lifts should always be number one, and access into a building should always be number one. The number of places I've been where there isn't even a ramp to go into the entrance of a reception is just shocking. And a ramp, you can buy even temporary ones, you can get ones that fold. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can make a building accessible without costing a lot of money. And every building should have that.
Yeah. What would you like to share with our listeners as a final thought?
Final thoughts. So this is something I actually said this to a doctor one time, and this was after, a really long, frustrating period of going back and seeing so many different specialists and facing a lot of rejection in the process of trying to find a diagnosis, which I'm sure lots of people can relate to. And I remember this particular appointment. In the UK, usually because of resourcing issues, when we see our primary care doctor, we only have 10 minutes, and that's 10 minutes to talk about one symptom. So if you have a chronic health condition, good luck being able to get everything in there that you want to speak about. And this was what felt like the 100th time of going back to the same doctor to say, we need to think of another option because we still haven't found the answer here. And they said to me, and I was a wheelchair user at this point, and they said, Kristen, you've exhausted our resources. There's nowhere else we can send you. And that, kind of felt like it stabbed me in the heart, because I'm like, well, what do I do? Because I still feel the way that I feel. I'm still feeling like I'm losing so much in my life, and I had a lot of anxiety because of, that just period of things becoming worse and worse and worse, and just feeling so unwell every single day. Like, my life cannot just be like this forever. And when I said to her that I might be 10 minutes of your day, but I am every minute of mine. And that always stuck with me. And I don't know how that line came out in that moment, but I think she was quite taken aback. And from that point, actually, she sort of changed the way that we were looking at things, which I really appreciated. But in that moment, I remember thinking that I could face every rejection in the world, but I'm the one that knows how I feel. I live in my body every single day, and therefore I am my best advocate. And therefore, if you ever are in an appointment or you don't agree with, the advice you're being given, or if you're ever in a situation where you are facing that rejection and you have a gut feeling that there's something not right, and you know how you feel, you absolutely have every right to seek another opinion and to push for more and to, persevere with the system and find other support. Because most of the time, if not all the time, your gut feeling is right. So I think it's important to always be your best advocate, always stand up for yourself where you need to. And it's difficult in the beginning because we do put so much trust into our healthcare practitioners, and they are very experienced and they are, so knowledgeable, but no one could be as knowledgeable about your own body as you. So
Yeah.
that's something that I would love to say to my old self, and that helps somebody.
Yeah, and it's a great message, and eventually you got through and reached the mind and soul of that doctor, I guess. How and where can interested people find you online, Kristen?
So I'm very active on both LinkedIn and also on Instagram. So my LinkedIn is just at Kristen Paskins. The same for my Instagram handle, Kristen Paskins. That's Kristen with a K, and then Paskins. And yeah, LinkedIn more is around sort of more patient advocacy and talking about my own experiences. And then with Instagram is more kind of the supporting things that I do and the work that I do in disability advocacy and working with people with disabilities in that area. So yeah, there's always things going on. And I'm sure from this weekend, I'll share some pictures from my trip to Dubai and the inclusive padel tour, which is what I'm a part of. This is the international padel tour for people with disabilities. So it's just full of the most amazing and inspiring people. Everyone has their own experience with disability, and more than 90% really it's acquired disability. And it's the first time I was able to speak to people who had that experience in the way that I did. I very much felt like I was the only one who was going through this process of, who am I now? Because I look different, I feel different, everyone is treating me differently. And to actually speak with others that have had that experience and able to reassure me that all my feelings were normal was really important. And so, yeah, that's why I think sport is just such an amazing place to be. If you do have a health condition, so you can relate to those people. But yeah, if you want to follow any of the things that I'm doing, then feel free to follow me on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Fantastic. And of course, I will put that in the show notes and into the blog article as well. Kristen, thank you very much. That was a very inspiring, interesting interview. And you are doing a great thing. And good luck with your mission to bring to awareness, more or less to everybody with disabilities, that sport is a good thing, and all the options that are available. And again, dear listener, maybe you want to do something like this in your country. Would be lovely. Thank you, Kristen. Bye-bye. And good luck, of course, with the competition in Dubai. Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed the interview, learned something new, and maybe even got inspired to do travel on your own and to overcome all these fears and challenges that there are. Because with the right preparation, I think a lot of things are possible, which in the first place you think they are not. By the way, next time there will be another Actrim special, and this time it will be about the scientific session from RIMS. about the topic of supporting mental health and psychological well-being in MS. Very important, so I hope you tune in again. I hope you recommend the podcast to whoever might be interested in the topic. And if you haven't done so already, please rate the podcast wherever you are listening to it, so other people know what it is about and how you feel about it. And by that, please stay as positive and active as possible, and hear you next time. Bye! Thank you for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You may also be interested in the previously published episodes and posts, which you can find at ms-perspektive.com/podcast. Perspective with a K. You can also get a free PDF with 11 tips for your positive impact on MS at ms-perspektive.com/newsletter. If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach me at nele@ms-perspektive.com or on social media. See you next time.